hello. There we go. So it's after lunch. I can tell because the crowd has really picked up again. That's good news. How was lunch? Everybody full in this nice hot room, ready to fall asleep? No. Not going to happen, not with this next speaker. So, hey, before we get started, a couple things really important. One, fire exits need to stay unblocked. That means no standing in the doorways to watch the talk. We have all these comfortable seats here. They're for you. Use them. Second, cell phones. You know the drill. Turn them off, silence them. I don't care. I wore boots today for one purpose. Don't make me use it. Cool. You get it. Awesome. So you guys are in Ballroom C. This is the anything track. If that's not where you wanted to be, you got 2 seconds to run out that door before we close and lock you in. Not really. All right. So we are talking all about malware and ransomware and how this stuff is getting monetized by those threat actors. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Jared Phipps.
So good afternoon. If you're still doing it at the end, then I'll be happy. So Jared Phipps, I currently work for SentinelOne, but I wanted to start a little bit, maybe more about the background and kind of how I got into security. So I started working in college for I went to the University of Arizona, and I started working for the University of Arizona. Kind of free tuition's nice, right? And so when I was there, I started working on like web crawlers and things like that, and kind of like accidentally indexed some major web portals and things like that, and got some nasty grams. So that's where I kind of got into this insight of, hey, you know, cyber's kind of cool, cyber's kind of fun. And so I decided to go in the Air Force after college, and I joined Air Force in 2001, and my first assignment was Offutt Air Force Base. Now, Offutt Air Force Base is in Omaha, Nebraska, actually Bellevue, just south of Omaha. But they have this thing on there called StratCom. Has anybody ever heard of StratCom? We have some folks in here. Kind of important things are run out of StratCom, like, you know, the nuclear command and control for United States nuclear arsenal. So I get to Offutt, and I'm a brand new officer taking over some squadrons, and the first job I get is to manage a squadron that writes the code for the emergency access messages. So anybody here seen Hunt for Red October? Old school movies, all right. That little ticker tape that comes out of the submarine with the messages from DC that says do whatever. Yeah, so that was our unit that wrote that code. So I'm sitting at my apartment on a weekend, looking at some code that we're doing for our code review check-ins, thinking to myself, I probably shouldn't be looking at this code in my apartment on a weekend. Maybe nuclear command and control code shouldn't be accessible like this. So that's where I kind of started thinking about security. So I started working on a program there to put some, you know, check-in revision controls around the software programs. And then from there I ended up going down into the overall base networking, and long story short, ended up going down to San Antonio, Texas, where I still live today. And I got to do some really cool stuff down in San Antonio. So I'll just summarize that in my time in the Air Force, I got to work on both offensive programs and defensive programs. I spent all of 2007 in Iraq. So I'm not sure how many people have actually done cyber operations from a deployed perspective. It's kind of unique and not nearly as cool as you think it is, but I'll let you think it is, because that works for me. And then, you know, after that, I decided, hey, I've done my tours, I've done my duty. I'm going to go ahead and get out, and so I ended up working at MITRE for a couple of years. Again, sounds cool, was a lot of paperwork and whatnot, but spent a couple of years at MITRE before coming over onto the vendor side. So I want to kind of give that background, because as I'm going through a lot of this, I'm going to give some perspectives. It's important to note that everything I'm saying, there's sightings for on open publications and open source, and I'll tell you where they're coming from. Or they're coming from SentinelOne research. None of this is from my prior background, for those of you that want to come and arrest me for divulging classified. There is no classified being divulged. So if we're looking, let's start talking at a macro level first, and let's start talking about some of the trends. I remember the good old days when it used to be a worm and there was a file, and you could just disconnect your machines and run the cleaner utility, and it was kind of a pain in the butt because you crawled onto some desks every now and then, but it was pretty easy to keep things clean. Number one trend that's been going on, it started in probably late 2017, but we've seen it increasing in 2017 or 2018 and definitely in 2019. Adversaries across the board are avoiding static file objects as much as possible. And so if we're looking at the trends of the target attack types, you can see that there's just been a slow, well, I wouldn't say slow, but it's a very steady increase as I'm looking on the left. We're basically almost 100% rise in the tendency to use fileless attacks. So what am I talking about by fileless attacks? Because that's the buzzword everybody talks about, but nobody really says anything. I'm talking about anything that I can do. If I can do some sort of remote exploitation, then I can do post-exploitation without having to drop malware on. If I can attack you directly on PowerShell, and that is the preferred fileless attack method at the moment, is a direct connection into PowerShell. If I can invoke something directly into memory that establishes that connection and lets me have some sort of access to the box, that's ideal. Because now I'm issuing commands command at a time, or I'm running a script to issue commands command at a time. From the machine perspective is essentially the same, and there's no file getting scanned and no file being run through an AV system. So it's interesting. You can see sort of the PowerShell trend lines. A couple notes on this. I'm pulling this from our data sets, and the data sets are from deployed installs, and so most of these are running on prevention. So these are not successful attacks. These are attacks we're shutting down. So the number of attacks that are attempting to use PowerShell are quite a bit higher than actually being able to be successful here. So these trends are interesting, but again, you're getting it from a vendor perspective. I will say that the whole time I was in the DoD, I always thought like the vendor community had it figured out because they didn't have any sort of collection restrictions, and they didn't have all the sort of spying on U.S. citizens concerns that we always had to worry about. They were well organized, they were well funded, and then I get out into the industry side and I find out that everybody thinks the government's got it all figured out. Infinite pockets, they can spy on anybody they want to, they have all these magical boxes. The reality is we're all sitting in the room looking at each other like, who's got the answer, right? So the answer is en masse. There's a lot of data out there. So if I'm breaking down attack types, if I show this slide, even 3 or 4 years ago, it would have been 80% plus Windows. There's a strong trend now moving away towards Windows. There's a lot of Linux attacks going on right now. And I would categorize those on the Linux side largely in crypto miners, but more importantly, they're the staging and the host. They need the infrastructure to run the attacking from. And I'll get into this in a bit, but the cybercrime is really split into almost like a business supporting a business. So you have the folks that are actually going out there and conducting the campaigns, and you have the folks that are building the infrastructure for the campaigns to be ran against. So the groups that really care about going after Linux infrastructure, the groups that are building the campaigns to let people launch with. Mac OS, pretty standard, and I've kind of dropped this down for you to see the threat attacks as we've seen. So the most common and the most popular one and the noisiest one out there is Emotet. I'm going to focus mostly on Emotet today. I would describe Emotet as like the SECM for hackers, right? It's a Trojan that lets them remote command and control and update, and it's really a service now being provided for others. So it's not a surprise that we're going to see a ton of Emotet. Okay. I love threat intelligence as much as anybody else, but we need to use threat intelligence properly. As much as we can use it as a hygiene layer for proactive protection, and that means let's block on known malicious stuff that's coming from threat intelligence, let's do that. But what I have seen from both the government side and the commercial side that I've been involved with is an over-reliance on threat intelligence. And so I want to kind of show you why I make that claim. So what you're looking at is, you're seeing here the total number of detections compared to reputation services. I would name them, but I'm kind of afraid to, but you all use them. There's very few out there, and it's one common one that everybody uses, so you know what I'm talking about. So if I look at that, at the point that a Sentinel-1 agent, and for those of you who don't know what Sentinel-1 does, it's behavioral and AI detection, so we're not using signatures for detection. So at the moment we make a detection, then what you can see right here is 73% of the time we've made that detection. At that moment in time, the reputation service cloud is completely unaware of that threat. 20% of the time it's able to determine it's malicious. 2% of the time it's actually saying, no, that's not malicious, that's benign. And that is actually the holy grail for attackers, by the way. And the remainder of that time, that 5%, is suspicious. So I wanted to break this down further. So let's look about portable executables. So the .exes, the MSIs, DLLs, things of that nature. So if I look at that, then 77% of the time that I submit an executable or a portable executable to a cloud-based threat intelligence reputation service, it is unknown. And so this is the one that was surprising to me, because this should be the low-hanging fruit. This is where the reputation services should be helping us. And they do help us. I'm not saying by any means we don't leverage them. But what I am saying, let's be cautious that we're having an overconfidence because of having them. But to this piece here, documents. So as we delve into Emotet and some of these other things, PDFs and macro-embedded documents is the preferred method of transport. So right here, 96% of the time, I'm not sure you can really read that, especially if you're in the back. So that tiny purple writing on a tiny purple background, you're welcome for that. That says 96%. So 96% of the time that we've identified a malicious document, it is completely unknown to the threat intelligence services. Now, the key point to this is if you are in the adversary side and you're running these campaigns, you only need a 24-hour window to run your campaign. So this is the only number that matters. So if you're from a campaign operator perspective, you now know the way that you want to operate your campaign, and that's going to be through documents. So holistically, the point I'm trying to make is we can leverage the threat intelligence from a protection and prevention standpoint to block the known commodity, or what I would term as the residual attacks that are continuing to propagate. These would be like, hey, at the end of World War II, we dropped a bunch of bombs and there was unexploded ordnance. The residual attacks would be the unexploded cyber ordnance still floating around in cyberspace. Threat Intel is fantastic for blocking that, and that's about 90% of the noise you see, because a lot of these folks just pick up and reuse. So if we look at detection classifications holistically across the install base, overall, executables are responsible for about 80% of the detections on average, and that's where you're seeing that purple bar. So this tells you that there is just a ton of noise in the cyberspace. That is not new. That shouldn't be earth-shattering to anyone, and I'll have some stories about that. The documents and the fileless attacks, they have the smallest share on the top. So the smallest amount of noise, the smallest amount of alerts is what's causing the greatest amount of damage. So I don't think that's going to be earth-shattering or shocking to anyone, but here's a quantifiable, metrics-driven way to have that conversation based on what we can see. So question, nation-state, cybercrime, one and the same, different? What do you guys think? One and the same? Completely different? Okay. Is there any hybrid between the two, do you think? Okay. So the greatest hybrid, which in my opinion, and I'm giving you this from my perspective, is actually North Korea, which has been dubbed a few different things. I'm going to base all my terminology on MITRE ATT&CK. One, because I used to work at MITRE and I like MITRE, but more importantly because we as an industry need to get better at having a common vernacular as we start to address these things. Even if you run through the MITRE ATT&CK listings on there now, multiple of these APT actor sets are the same group, and they've simply gotten labels in APT because of different tool setting. So North Korea is probably the only strong example I can give you of nation-state sponsored cyber criminal activity, not espionage, but criminal. And largely is categorized in two APT actor sets. There's arguments for a third. I'll contend that that third is actually a subset, just an existing unit of 38. So APT 38 is the cyber crime side. APT 37 is the cyber government side. So North Korea has a cyber unit. That surprises a lot of people. We think of them as sort of backwater. I know a lot of people were really surprised, and they got introduced to North Korea when the Sony stuff went down, but they have been out there for quite a while. On the commercial side, on the cybercrime side, there's a very real reason it exists, and they initially spun off their cybercrime unit out of their governmental organization after U.S. sanctions imposed and made it difficult to get money into the regime. And so the cybercrime unit started doing some very sophisticated attacks targeting banks in the region. So if you can compromise banks like the Bangladesh bank, and you can compromise the SWIFT servers, the banking servers that are responsible for some of the transactions, then you can actually order up transactions from various organizations. So that was one of the first attacks that they had, was from the Bangladesh Central Bank to the Federal Reserve. They ordered up $1 billion. They got away with about 81 million. Okay? So if you're North Korea, that's 81 million of cash infusion. That comes at a really perfect time when you're dealing with economic sanctions. Overall, they've definitely cleared 100 million. They probably cleared close to 200 million during those banking timeframes, and definitely one of the ways that they were able to get around the economic sanctions that happened. So that was a 2016 timeframe. Since then, we've seen them do a couple of other interesting things. They've still maintained their focus on SWIFT. If you're in the banking or the credit union industry and you're worried about that, their average dwell time in 2016 was around 190 days. They're down to around 120, 130 days. They're going to go into an organization and they will definitely focus on getting access to credentialed accounts, and then all of their discovery and the lateral propagation that is done is through credentialed accounts. It's a very methodical process, and it's very difficult to detect. They're not, newsflash, they're not doing their connections from North Korea. There's 2 internet connections in North Korea. They're not coming from North Korea. So I like to have this little GIF video because everybody's seen this. This is the North Korea at night, right? So how does the peninsula, that has like 0 lights in it, hitting up and lighting up in the cyber campaign so well? So as a communist country, it shouldn't be a surprise that they modeled the training regime in a very Soviet-era style. And this is really as you would expect to be done. And so instead of in the athletic program, this really is mirrored from a cyber program. They find kids who have a great aptitude at mathematics, and those are selected, down-selected, and those group can attend a specific class of middle schools. So their secondary middle school educations. Those that are the top performers in those schools then are eligible to attend one of the 2 universities. Okay, so you're just building this funnel of natural aptitude talent and kind of funneling it down. Once you graduate from those schools, then you're able to join the military services, and you'll be joining the Reconnaissance General Bureau. So it's their version of the intelligence community that we have in the U.S. So you're joining that community, those with top propensity in the whole person perspective, which means not just the mathematics and the cyber, but also loyal to the regime, the leadership, the kind of structure. Those folks that demonstrate the greatest propensity are then eligible to go to Shenyang for the further follow-on training. It's about a 2-hour train ride on a bullet train from the North Korea border over to that city, and that's where they get their advanced cyber training. Now, once you've earned the trust, you've had the training, and you've had the skill set, then the North Korea's regime is to transfer you out of China into one of the countries that lets you accept individuals. And so when you're transferred out, you'll be going to the countries listed here: Indonesia, Kenya, the new shocker for most people, it's New Zealand. When you're able to go to those countries, you're not just showing up. You're going to show up and you're going to establish a business, or you're going to show up applying for a job. So recommendation is don't hire anyone from North Korea to work on your IT staff. We laugh, but it actually is happening, and it's happening a lot. So once in place, then they're being managed, organized, and structured under the Reconnaissance General Bureau. So while we look at it as APT-38 and APT-37, it is all coming from the same command control structure within North Korea. Okay. So in terms of outlook, we've had some interesting things. They have historically focused on banking and the SWIFT servers. But in the last couple of years, we've had a massive rise of cryptocurrency. And cryptocurrency is very appealing to North Korea for a lot of reasons, among them the difficulties associated with sanctions. And so what we've seen now is initially attacks from North Korea targeting into South Korea and Southeast Asia, but actually targeting owners of Monero and Bitcoin. So they went, let's just hack the Bitcoin directly. I'm not sure that was the smartest decision initially, but they ran some of those campaigns, especially across South Korea. And that was interesting, but early 2019, we started to see actually North Korea decide, let's just get in on the ransomware game itself. Meaning, why don't I just set up these structures like I've seen Fin6 and others do very successfully, and bring the money back directly to the regime. APT-37, however, is the Reconnaissance Bureau organization. They're not going to change their structure. At least I don't anticipate they've changed their structures. They're going to maintain their focus on South Korea intelligence gathering and onto the United States. So if we can deface or defocus the United States, embarrass the Western governments, that's a plus. So stepping outside of that one where it's nation-sponsored, then you move into this sort of the gray zone. So running through the MITRE ATT&CK list, here's the primary organizations that actually deal with cybercrime, cyber theft, and in that space. If you're going through this list, you'll notice that most of these are attributed to Russia. What I will say when people are attributing to Russia, what they should be saying is they are seeing Russian language characters or Russian speaking influences on the folks that are writing or operating the code bases. That does not mean that it's endorsed in any way by Russia other than allowing it to operate. So sort of the attitude is, as long as you don't mess around with our banks, as long as you don't mess around with our companies, we're going to kind of turn a blind eye to what you're doing. That's the mentality. So a lot of these organizations, you have the technical skill set, you have the internet availability, they're able to build some pretty sizable businesses. The Grand Crab authors are claiming that they made $1 billion in about a year. I don't think it was $1 billion. They kind of tout and overestimate everything they do. Let's say 400 million, 500 million. That's still a lot of money to make for probably a small group of folks. But if you look at this, I would say that Fin6 is one of the ones that I find the most intriguing. They've really focused for a long time on point of sale, attacking the point of sale systems and credit card resale. But they've always been able to operate like a business. I'm very confident that organization brings in over $1 billion a year. These organizations operate very much almost like a franchise with a CEO structure, jobs and roles defined, and they're pretty substantial in size. So cybercrime, like you would expect a mafia structure organization, very similar in that fashion. The result, though, is that you've had such a strong, steady influx of cash that over time groups have been able to peel off and focus on what their really good expertise is. So the Emotet development, right, you see them focus on building this infrastructure to host and manage the malware campaigns. Fin7 is one of the interesting ones because they have some ties to Muddy Water, which has been associated with Iranian groups. I don't really think I have enough to say at this point in time to give any sort of government attributions one way or the other on that, so I'm just going to let that one lie, other than to say that that one's definitely not Russian. RTM is, I guess, the craziest of the group because Russian-speaking going after Russian banks, like, why poke the bear when you live in the bear den? And that's what they're doing. We'll see how that plays out. And then TA505. So in TA505 in 2019, it started using Andromut and Flawed Army to build like a full-featured rat, and they're entering the ransomware game en masse now. So the common trend here, which probably shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, is ransomware. Has anybody dealt with ransomware themselves yet? Yeah, like if you look around the room, you're not alone, so don't feel like you are. So why the rise in ransomware? The easy answer is because it's an easy way to monetize it. But we need to understand a little bit more behind it. Number one is actually the speed in which the entire campaign can be conducted. If you're looking at how North Korea has been doing it, where it's taking them basically 6 months, they're pulling in a large amount of money, but it's taking them 6 months to get there. If I can, as a small group of individuals, make $500 million in 12 months, without the complexities or the risks associated from pulling $81 million from a single actor, that's probably the route I'm going to go. Because I can hit people all over the world. It's going to be really hard to track me down, and I can do it really, really quickly, as in a matter of days, weeks, and we'll walk through some of the time frames here. The payout is faster, and this is the thing. People are transferring you the money because they have to, because their operations are shut down and they are under a time duress, so that the payouts happen a lot faster. And so what you're seeing is a focus on smash and grab. I need more smash and grab, faster, faster, faster. So the entire speed of attack, the ability to automate as much of the attack as possible is what the focus is. And when we look at Emotet, we're going to see they've actually helping build the automation focuses in place. But then you run into this other perfect holy grail where there needed to be a way to get paid, and that's where cryptocurrency steps in place. Bitcoin, obviously, is the first one. South Korea entering that Bitcoin space legitimized that as a currency. Like when a nation state is involving and transacting on that currency, that gives it a stability. And if you're in cybercrime, that's enough stability for you. Like you're not looking for it to be backed by the US government, right? Anything will do that legitimizes it, takes a bit of the risk out, and now you can transact. It's also eliminated a lot of the need for mules. So if you're looking back, say, 10 years ago, when we would see some of these attacks happening, people are targeting banks, they're pulling and issuing ATM cards, then you're passing those ATM numbers, and people all over the world are printing them out, physically running up ATMs, draining them as they drive across town. Then you've got to split the cost with those mules, you've got to figure out how to launder that money. Like, that's a pain. Over here, I can just get paid cryptocurrency and go. Like, it's so much cleaner. I'm eliminating who I have to split money with. I'm eliminating them turning on me if the cops find them. It just takes so much risk down. But finally is payment. So what they've learned is ransomware works. They do it, they'll get paid. And they're going to get paid because there's contracts that obligate them to get paid. And here's what I mean by that. Everybody out there, it seems today, has a cyber insurance policy or a rider on their cyber insurance policy. And I'm not throwing the cyber insurance industry under the bus because it is their job to pay out on contracts which they write. But what I'm saying is if cryptocurrency wasn't here and cyber insurance wasn't here, I don't think you would see the payout levels that you say on ransomware today. You just wouldn't have this volume of payouts happening. But because this holy grail kind of lined up and everything, just all the stars aligned, it's made it very, very easy. So I'll walk you through the process. You're an organization, you get hit with ransomware, and it's a non-recoverable event. You can call up your broker, and you call and make the claim with your insurance. In most cases, they will send out an IR firm to deal with this event for you. The IR firm will actually carry a Bitcoin wallet. They will negotiate a ransom, come up to a terms with the ransomware over what that ransom should be. Then they will send a couple of encrypted files for proof of life. The attacker will send the decrypted files back, proving that they have a key that decrypts those files. They'll transfer the exchange of the Bitcoin for the decryptor tools. Decryptor tools will take anywhere from 12 to 36 hours to run. They'll run with different varying degrees of confidence, but chances are you're going to get a good chunk of your data back. You can restore your business. So the insurance industry knows that if they don't do this, they could be held liable for breach of contract for not helping businesses get restored when they're supposed to be. So with this, there's a very, very substantial amount of work, as in probably 40 cases, 50 cases, 60 cases a day going out of some of these insurers. And we have dozens of these insurers. So what's I think most people are not aware of is the volume and scale at which ransomware is going on. Like, people are completely clueless at the scale and volume that this is happening. And this is because it's not a reportable event. You do not have to disclose it. There is no data breach. So the data breach is an incident that results in the confirmed disclosure of data, right? On a ransomware, it just gets bucketed into the incident pile. There is no disclosed information in the majority of these cases. So if we look at 2019, on the DBRI report, we're expecting around 2,000 breaches and 40,000 incidents. So a 40 or 20x multiple, I think, is actually higher than that myself. A breach is around 8 million each. Yet the cost of ransomware, when you look at business disruption plus the IR firm cost plus the ransom costs, are exceeding 75 billion. So we spend all of our time talking about a fraction of the problem. And that's a concern to me. So let's talk Emotet, because this is the godfather that's enabling this ransomware epidemic to go. So Mealybug started this stuff off in early 2014, originally in a banking Trojan. And most of these organizations in cybercrime were always focused on banking prior anyways. So to evade detections, they got really, really good very early on at being polymorphic, at being self-propagating, and they got some good technology there to exist in an organization and maintain and update itself. Now, it didn't take long before they figured out that they could modularize the approach and load attack modules into the existing infrastructure, and then that led them to realize, hey, there's an option for us to make money by enabling other people to use us as a transport service or enablement service for their attacks. So what Emotet is really, really good at, they're really, really good at evading core standard defenses. Think of your firewalls and your AVs. Like, they've spent the last 10 years getting really good at this stuff because they were doing these types of things before 2014. Right? So there's building on a decade plus of experience, and now they're able to roll out tools that are very effective at this. They have two really, really large botnets, Epic 1 and Epic 2, available for their disposal, which helps them manage that infrastructure really nicely. And then you've seen them now starting to move on to modularize or improve their business offering, which means I can have some spam modules built in. So your box get hits with Emotet, it'll automatically pull up your context list, try to figure out how to send a custom crafted email, spam email, so that the attacker doesn't have to do it for you. These are options you can now go in and turn on. And then it has some built-in password cracking module, which is actually really not good. Most people are still dropping Dridex or something else with it, but they're trying to work on that. So you're seeing that Emotet is not really concerned about what that post-exploitation is going to be. They're really concerned about enabling consistent access once you've got Emotet hit. And that's where they're going to spend their money and their time. So among the things that I do at SentinelOne, I manage our incident response program. And so we partner with a lot of IR firms that go out and respond, or we've actually done some of these incidents with them. So this one I'm going to give you because this was the second one I got to deal with when I joined SentinelOne. And I don't know what it is about attacks, but they always happen in December. Like in December of 2016 and 2017, I got called on Christmas Eve, December 24th, both years. Like, I don't know what it is about December 24th, but I'm terrified to answer the phone now. So at least this year it came early. I was grateful for that. I'm like, all right, it started early. So this company kind of came into work. It's a manufacturing company that had the standard, it's got a firewall, didn't have an IPS, kind of had that unified firewall IPS, the new combo thing. And then it had some legacy AV installed. And it was fully compliant. So I know we have this side topic of compliance and security aren't the same thing. Absolutely true. Here's proof of that. So fully compliant, but they wake up and they walk into work and 18 sites are completely encrypted. So what do I mean by that? Well, their ERP system was encrypted. Their Exchange servers were encrypted, and none of them were offline, by the way, so they were all encrypted. Payroll system. They weren't using a cloud-based payroll system. They couldn't make payroll. Their ESX hosts were actually running their manufacturing process in their plants. So their ability to manufacture their product and get it out the door stopped. So quite literally, the company came to a standstill on December 12th. On December 14th, the IR firm that the insurance company had provided engaged with them, and they had an initial $850,000 ransom demand from the attacker. On the 21st, that firm was kicked out because the business still wasn't operational. Okay, so they engaged a new IR firm. This happens to be the firm that SentinelOne supports, and so this is where we kind of got involved into the game. So on the 22nd, we had deployed SentinelOne on 5,000 systems. They had like 4,800, so I just say 5,000. And we got their ERP, payroll, and their NetApp systems. So they were able to get a payroll processed for the 23rd, although it didn't show up for all employees, but at least some of them got paid before Christmas. And that was a really big issue. This business almost went out of business, by the way, and this isn't a small company. It's 5,000 people. So what was happening? Why did the first insurance IR firm fail, and why did the second one win? So, fantastic technique. The decryption tool absolutely decrypted the box. Then it dropped the next one. And it dropped it with a new key and a new encryption and a new ransom negotiation. Very, very fortunately for this organization, and this almost never happens, an organization, I'll just leave it at that, was able to provide them the decryption key, so they didn't actually pay ransom on either case. But this comes out to a great point of, if you hit with ransomware and you decrypt the box, do not reinstall the same protection product that failed the first time, because it's going to fail again, just FYI. So the only difference was the second firm came in and they dropped SentinelOne in, which was able to identify that the ransomware decryptor tool they'd gotten was indeed actually dropping a second Trojan and restarting the whole process, and that was what the issue was. So by December 23rd, company is fully functioning and running again. So I think that's a pretty interesting story because we're talking in traditional senses of dwell times of 100 plus days, and that leads us to a comfort level of, hey, I can handle detection in a couple hours or a couple days, and I can handle responses in a 72-hour time frame. What I'm telling you is that model's done. Like, it may work great on the APT side still, and it's very valid for the APT side, but all of you are at more risk from a cybercrime than an APT side, or a nation-state APT, I should clarify. Now, the second study, this is my favorite one. Don't read too far ahead because you'll miss the fun. So this one happened in March. We had a company call us up and they said, hey, actually as a partner of ours called us up and said, hey, one of our clients, they have 2 confirmed Emotet infections. And we've done a good job of training our customers, like, hey, Emotet is precursor to ransomware events. Here's the timelines they typically come under. So saying, hey, you're always telling us this stuff happens really fast. What are we going to do? And my answer is, well, let's put Sentinel-1 on there and then we'll figure everything out after. And so we agreed to put Sentinel-1 on there while they were doing that. So, like, my team, some of our support team, like, we en masse, we had people working 24 hours a day. We dropped 42,000 agents in 38 hours. Like, that's a lot of work, FYI, if you haven't done that. That's a lot of work. But the ransom never hit. We're proud of ourselves. We're like, all right. And then we call in one of our companies who's an IR partner of ours to go in and actually do the IR and find out what's the scope, what's the engagements, what's the limitation. And Mike is a good friend of mine at that IR firm. I call him up after day 1. I'm like, hey, how bad did it get? How close are we getting to hit? And he's like, there's nothing there. Like, what do you mean there's nothing there? Like, there was 2 Emotet infections. There had to be something else coming. He's like, no, there was nothing there. Let me dig into some more. Long story short, they going in, they're doing their hunting. Sentinel-1 has an EDR product, so we can go and give you visibility everywhere. So they're doing, they're scoping out the environment. They're finding out everywhere everything has been. When you have, and let's look at the dates here. On the 14th of March, the CISO was walked out of the building. Essentially a precursor to being fired, but literally walked out of the building and put on terminal leave. What happened is one of the employees of the CISO was rather ambitious. They wanted to implement some security programs, and the CISO is telling him, I don't have the budget to implement your programs. So to embarrass the CISO, he was going to stage an Emotet attack to show how vulnerable the company was. So he staged the attack, got the massive response in, and the CISO got fired. Everything's going exactly as he wanted it to go until the IR firm comes in and tracks it down and figures out this was only installed on 2 machines, and you logged into both machines within 5 seconds of being installed, and oh, by the way, you're the one that installed it. So, long story short, employee's not in jail because he signed some stuff with the company, but is not an employee anymore. CISO is reinstated, and insider threat's real. So, this is the world we live in security. Like, it's a muddled mess sometimes. And it's really hard to understand what all we're looking at. So, again, I've seen, and I pulled this off of a series of blogs. These are some of the things I hear. Half of ransomware victims pay the ransom, and IR firms will do that. I think it's a lot more than half. I think it's way higher than half. But this is what I hear, this is what I read online. In my experience, unless there's some way of having that key provided, the firms are going to be paying that. Now, on a publicly disclosed one where they don't have a cyber insurance policy, then it's probably closer to half. But if there's a cyber insurance policy in case, then the business wants to be back online, they have a legal contract to get back online, there's an avenue to do it, so they're going to do it. Only a quarter of them get all data back. So RIA could restore 80%. Yes and no. Those decryptor tools do a really good job. They're not going to decrypt 100% of the files in the box, but typically they're decrypting all of the data files. What's really annoying is when they've encrypted some sort of system process file and they can't decrypt that one, then you've got to go like piecemeal and hunt on the different websites to try to find and reinstall that. And half the time it's just cleaner to build a new server in that case. But those usually are around some custom application server that you end up dealing with that world. So by and large, it's in their interest to make sure you get your files back, or people would stop paying, and then that would kill themselves. So they do work pretty hard to make sure you can get paid. There's been an increase of 200% in ransomware claims from 2018 to 2019 year over year. I would definitely agree with that. It may even be higher. I will tell you that this last bullet is from me, that the IR firms we see are seeing customers offline for about 3.5 days. I mean, in many cases, they can't operate their business, or they're under impairment from the attack for about 3.5 days. The insurance companies and the brokers we're working with are telling them it's around 10 to 14 days. So speed is definitely the game. All right, so let's talk a little bit about speed then. So let's say that one of your users clicks on a malicious Word document, and that malicious Word document has a macro embedded inside of it and invokes Emotet. What's going to happen? So this is it. So the Emotet piece is the blue. And across 10 runs, it's going to take an average of 22 seconds for that Emotet to run and drop. Then you have whatever that dropper is going to be. MacTub, Ryuk, whatever the ransomware is going to be. Oftentimes, though, the initial dropper isn't, and it's really going to depend on the organization coming, isn't going to necessarily be the ransomware itself. The holy grail is clean, accessible user accounts. So if you have a lead on a security shop and they don't have any defenses in place and you feel like you have no defenses in place, then they're going to go in there and they're going to try to be going after user accounts. There's actually a built-in module in Emotet now that actually scans the network looking for default, like admin passwords on network appliances and devices. Once they find those, report those back. Then you put a monitor tap on those, and now you're looking for user creds. Getting into boxes, trying to do privilege escalation, and get domain creds. Once you have domain creds, then you can take your time to hunt around and figure out what you want. The manufacturing company I was talking to, that's what happened to them. They had a 72-hour dwell time before the ransomware was launched. The ransomware was launched as the attackers were walking out the door. What they did with those domain creds is they went into the email servers, they found legitimate business conversations, they replied emails to their business partners as part of ongoing legitimate business operations with attachments relevant to the conversation that got their business partners infected with the same ransomware. And that's what they used the time for. It could have been used for way, way worse, but they just care about time. Smash and grab, move on. So I'll describe that as code-on-code warfare, or at least that's the era we're entering into. It's no longer enough, no matter how good we are at cyber operations and how good we are at shutting things down, we are moving to a code-on-code warfare, which means I need adaptive code to respond to adaptive code. So if I'm looking at this 149 seconds, this is how inside of a behavioral system like Sentinel-1, I can track those actions across that 149 seconds, what I'm seeing and what I'm looking for. So I've got a quick little, I was going to try to do this thing live, but I'm just not going to trust my phone at the moment. So I will play you the video because this is what I did in Japan. So sorry for the Japanese at the beginning here. Maybe I should put it at the beginning. So what I've done is I've taken a Word document and I've embedded a macro into this Word document, and then I'm using this to load Emotet. And I just grabbed this as one of the Emotets, so it's pretty funny because one day it drops MacTub and another day it drops something else, but it's dropping something and it's live. So you can see when it kicks off that, okay, I'm going to come in and I'm using Sentinel-1 products, so I have access to this to show me what's going on here, but now I've got visibility of what this actual attack is doing. And let me get down to the attack storyline. Okay, so I want to get right before that. Okay, so you can see right here that here's the WinWord, it's got the macro embedded. The initial connection happening out is the PowerShell connections we see, and then the PowerShells are great because it allows you to spawn off multiple things simultaneously as needed. So I can go back and I can actually start to get my console host for my interactive shell, but I can also mess with things like group policy update and VSS updates, things like that. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. If I look at the raw data report from that type of attack, you can literally walk step by step. So we have just tons and tons of these systems. We'll just run and detonate and watch these things go across. That's how we can create what we can confirm to be an attack chain sequence associated with Emotet or any other variants. When you have this across, hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of endpoints, it's very, very helpful. If you look back on the endpoint that this is hit, in this particular case it dropped MacTub. You can see there's the MacTub, which what MacTub is going to do is it's going to go into your documents and it's going to encrypt your documents. So you can see right here that these files are encrypted. And so I'm going to give you a quick couple seconds to talk about code-on-code warfare again. It just moves a little too fast for me. If you look across the top here, you'll see that I have the standard kill quarantine options that I would in a traditional AV product. But what I want to focus a bit more is this remediate and rollback options. So what I'm saying is code-on-code warfare, I need machines to be autonomous, or I need machines to be self-defending. And this is one of the biggest draws for me to come to Sentinel-1 actually, was this mentality and how it works. So in this particular case, since I allowed the box to get decrypted, I'm just going to come in Sentinel-1, I'm going to hit a rollback option. And when you come into the machine, you'll see it as it kills. What it's going to do is it's going to first kill the active running processes. It's going to work left to right across that chain. So this big banner here represents the running process. Sentinel-1 is going to kill that process. Now it's going in behind the scenes when you can't see anything. It's undoing any of the registry modifications. Then it's going to go through and it's going to update the scheduled tasks and remove the scheduled tasks that were put in for persistence mechanisms. Then it's going to go into the VSS stores that had an anti-tamper around, and it's going to figure out which files are modified. It restores the files for the users. This entire video is like 2 minutes and 23 seconds. So that entire attack defense cycle was 2 minutes. Like top to bottom. So that's kind of what I'm proposing now, is we need to start looking at how fast they're operating and get ourselves positioned to be able to operate that quickly as well. Here's a REIC time frame, and you'll see here, that one took 3 seconds, not the 22. Okay, so the speed, and this is probably the biggest trend that I keep going back to over and over, the speed and the attack that's happening is happening faster. Now, I like MITRE ATT&CK quite a bit. I think this is Fin 6, but they have an attack navigator, by the way, if you're not familiar with this. Really, really cool. But it's also important to understand how to use MITRE ATT&CK. This is where vendors give themselves a bad name, and every single vendor that participated in this put out a paper explaining why they were the best ones at this. MITRE is not an actual comparative analysis testing, so it was never meant to be that, interestingly enough. What it is it's a TTP. So historically, down in San Antonio, there was an organization called the 23rd Squadron, and they would build TTPs of adversarial methods. What you're trying to understand is how do cyber operators operate so you can behaviorally start to make an attribution to who they are. Most attribution done today is done by reverse engineering the code, looking at the character sets, what are the natural language processing, and then you look at sort of the communications that you may have had back and forth with someone, and then you're going to make a conclusion, oh, this is Russian because of X, Y, or Z. What we're now doing is taking that and expanding it into the methodologies over time across a larger data set of companies and organizations, instead of just within the federal government or just within the military. Now we can do it across all commercial organizations. So if you're dealing with a Fin 6, for example, you know that these are the types of techniques in these tactical columns that they're going to run through and use. The problem we make with defenders is that some of these techniques are very, very legitimate, like PowerShell. Anybody use PowerShell in your organization? Yeah. So what are you going to do if you have a product that generates an alert every single time PowerShell is used? Well, you're probably going to be like, I'm turning that alert off, right? That's what I did back in the day. It's what everybody's going to do. And then you end up creating a black hole because now you don't see that. So what I'm saying is, in order to have an autonomous code-on-code defense system, we need to be able to be contextually aware, and this is what MITRE had called the tainted concept, and they're going to rename it to relinking here in the next iteration, but you want to understand that PowerShell was invoked, but how it was invoked in the context prior as well as its post activities to determine whether or not that's something that's malicious to be done. This is what an analyst will do by doing an EDR query and then sitting there and studying it. The problem is taking 2 or 3 seconds for REIC and these other ransomwares to operate and execute. You don't have the time to do that studying. So coming from a military background, I like to think of things in terms of fog of war. If you're in a warfare environment, it's chaotic, it's noisy, there's events going off all the time, there's good people, there's bad people, you definitely don't want to be shot by your friends, especially when your friends have the bigger bullets. And so if you look at what Brian Krebs was talked about, he put this one out after the Marriott breach. The paradigm we're in today is that the adversary only has to get through once. They don't get arrested, they don't get shot, they don't get anything for attacking you. They do it all day long, and they only have to be right one time. Right? You have to be right 100% of the time. And this has been a struggle up to this point when the attacks were meant to be low and slow. Now that we're moving to a smash and grab model where, frankly, they don't even care. They don't even care that they're that their attacks may be fingerprinted and available in 24 hours. Like that's a huge window for them. So now what we need to do is figure out how do we move into this environment of code-on-code warfare. How do I operate autonomously? And so let me think of it this way. Everything that's known threats, I have a legacy stack. We used to call that whole defense on depth, which we then recoined into expense in depth. And I come from the organizations that help build that model. We still have to have that varied infrastructure, and we need to have the multiple views of things. But we definitely need a better connectivity tissue between these types of products, and that's where you see the security orchestration market coming across, which I'm definitely a big fan of that. The problem is just buying it and putting it in place isn't enough. It has to be put in place with the playbooks that are actually effective. Nobody is either confident in their playbooks to let them run completely autonomously, or they don't have buy-in from the business to support them, and that's the bigger challenge. So we as security professionals need to get better at providing C-level context about what the lack of our orchestrated responses are causing. And this might be the way we need to start thinking about this. As a society, we're very familiar with automated actions being taken on our behalf, especially when it comes to things like planes or cars. So if I look at things like forward collision warning and the decreases of risks, right? And then I go to a CFO and I say, I want to buy all vehicles going forward that have forward collision warning on them because this is going to reduce my rates by this. That's going to get a great sign from a CFO. And if I come in and I say, and I add auto brake to that, now my front to rear crashes are decreased 50%. Then the CFO can walk in and look at that organization and go, man, I could cut back 50% of the accidents we had last year. That could have saved me X amount. It could have saved me this lawsuit. It could save this endangerment of life. Whatever that may be, there's a quantifiable term to that. What we're struggling with on our side right now is the ability to have that conversation. So I'm going to skip those. And let me kind of say that maybe this is an initial attempt to how we can characterize this and have this type of conversation. Your legacy stack, this is the Emotet stack running on it today. When you have a truly autonomous system, this is a Sentinel-1 that can operate truly autonomously from both a prevention and a restoration side frame, this is that risk mitigation factor. So you can show a side-by-side comparison of pre and post and what impact that has on risk associated with the ransomware payouts that you've seen across the industry. Because computers operating at computer speed against computers is going to be faster than me and my friends at Sentinel-1 doing that kind of stuff. So again, I want to leave some time at the end for questions. Would absolutely love to connect with anybody. So here's my contact information. Just please don't call me at 4:30 in the morning like I just got today. But outside of that, anybody have questions or comments or anything you'd like to dig in on?
Actually, I'm going to encourage you guys, if you have questions, to catch Jared after this. We are actually out of time.
Okay.
So if you could please put your hands together for Jared.